Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week, right in time for the Paris Olympics, we celebrate print in France. Plus, 2 cool new magazines from Amsterdam. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. To start the show, I must say that I'm very excited about the Paris Olympics. Of course, I do love the Olympics, and I love Paris even more. And this is The Stack, of course, so I invited Monocle's head of radio, Tom Edwards, for a nice chat about French magazines and some of my favorite picks in case you find yourself close to a kiosk in Paris right now.
Fernando, the Olympics in Paris, the Olympic Games, it started just yesterday, an incredible opening ceremony, of course, in the very heart of the city, as if we needed an excuse, but it provided one to put French magazines and the French newsstand firmly in the spotlight. And I guess that's my first question I'd ask you, Faye. France, Paris in particular, it's an incredible and dynamic market for print still, right? And something that, naturally, we're always keen to celebrate.
It's amazing, Tom. I mean, every time I go to Paris, it's a delight to go to kiosks. And perhaps we can start there at the kiosks. The fact that they still have many kiosks, I mean, that basically helps, people to have places where they can buy their newspapers and magazines. And I have to say, in a way, the French, they have to say thanks to the government as well, because there's a lot of protection to those places. So I think starting with the kiosks, I mean, it's one of the most exciting print markets in the world, perhaps competing even with Japan a little bit as well. So it's always a delight. So if you are in Paris for the Olympics, go to a kiosk. There will be plenty of special magazines out there.
And tell me, Faye, how we reflect this enthusiasm then for the Stack. Obviously, we often talk, Tyler is constantly giving you new magazines. In addition, some of our old favourites, of course, come from this market. But presumably, we often have some of the great editors, designers, innovators in print that feature on the show. Maybe more on the way. Whet our appetites.
Oh, there's lots more on the way, Tom. But it's true. It's almost an accident. I think it's almost an organic way. Here on The Stack, we have definitely French editors. In the last week's episode, we had the editor of Tempura magazine, which is a lovely French title that talks about Japanese cultural trends. It's niche, but they will expand. They will have an issue in English as well. Everything starts in France. There was a recent one, I think I mentioned to you, called Enthusiasmus. The magazine is in English. It's about one cultural figure, and that they do the whole issue based around them. Of course, it was with Johan Chiaramonte, who lives in Lyon, but also Roman Coppola. But the magazine is made in France. It's printed in France. So that just shows the dynamism of this market. And yes, there is a few surprises here and there of some very iconic titles, but maybe I can't say it for now.
We'll look forward to hearing more about and from those figures. Faye, look, you said let's start at the newsstand. Let's go back there. You're a frequent visitor to Paris for Monocle business, for your own leisure. When you're in the city, is there a particular place that you head to? Sometimes it's nice to have the serendipity. What can you find around a corner you've not explored before? Tell me a bit about where you buy your magazines when you're there.
I love the serendipity, as you were saying, but I have to say the first thing I do in Paris, I go to Le Kiosque de Paris in front of the Le Bon Marché. And, I have to go there because they won the prize for Monocle's Best European Newsstand. I wrote that piece for the magazine last year. They're excellent.
You don't try and leverage that, Faye, do you? And get a load of freebies from the kind patrons there.
I try. I do think I got a tote bag one day, but, please don't ask them for that. But they have everything. And the thing is, Tom, of course, I love independent titles, as I've mentioned, Tempura, Enthusiasmus, but I love the commercial titles in Paris as well. I think the dailies are very strong, and they have excellent magazines together with it. Le Monde, Le Magazine du Monde, the work that Marie-Pierre Lanelong does, it's amazing. I read the issue every week. They have amazing photo essays as well. Or Madame Figaro from Le Figaro that, it's kind of a magazine aimed at women, talking about fashion and beauty. And they're fat, I think, it comes very often, I think perhaps monthly. And, there's a lot of pages, lots of advertisement in there. And I have a little favorite, Paris Match. I think It's a nice mixture of gossip, kind of exclusive interviews. I'm curious, I'm sure they'll have a special Olympic issue coming out very soon as well. So I like that commercial side of things as well. They have beautiful titles too as well.
And I think I'm right in saying if people are perusing the newsstands at the moment, they might see a mention or two of Confect magazine, right? With some out-of-home promotion happening, which is, of course, very exciting for everyone in this building.
Just the Monocle Paris newspaper as well.
Of course, which is still available now. Faye, you've already mentioned, look, you've jumped around some bigger players, big commercial titles, as you say, some of the big weeklies from some of the huge institutional players there. Pick out one or two others to watch, whether they're more on the commercial side or smaller indie, even if they're super niche, even if it's almost in zine territory. Paris and France, they do all of it. Give us one or two others to watch.
There is one that is fairly newish, and I definitely want to have them on the stack very soon. So if they are listening to me, it's called Bâtard Magazine, which is a magazine about culture and dogs, or dogs and culture, but in French. You know, that feels to me quite special. Holiday is always a beautiful thing. You know, they come out every 6 months, and they go to one destination, a magazine, but it's huge, it's heavy, you know, and I think the last one was Kathmandu, so I cannot wait to see where are they going in September. We need to mention Regan as well by our own Daphne Azard. She makes French agriculture seems very sexy. I love the retro covers as well. There's so many, and you know what? I like the trashy ones as well. Voici, I think I showed it to you last year. They have lovely summer issues, you know, a lot of half-naked French stars and some puzzles as well, so you can practice your French. It's a thing of beauty, Tom. Merci, and as always, expect more content from France in the coming weeks here on The Stack. We head to Amsterdam now to speak with Angela Blumen, founder of creative studio and publishing house Fanfaretti. She's also publishing the very first issue of Fanfaretti magazine. The first issue is all about localism, and it is a tribute to the city of Amsterdam and an exploration of other local stories. Let's hear it from Angela herself.
It's a made-up word entirely. I think when I was thinking about what the magazine or the studio should be named, I really wanted it to be a word that doesn't exist yet, but that kind of sounds fun. And, well, Fanfaretti has the word fun in it. When I was asking the people around me what they thought about the name, actually, some of them said it is a mix of a fanfare and confetti, which I didn't think of at all, but in the end it is. So that's what it is. It's a celebration.
It matches perfectly, actually, with the magazine that I'm reading. But, you know, everything has a beginning. So before we actually talk about the magazine, the studio came first. So tell us a bit more. I know it's a branding studio, Fanfaretti, based in Amsterdam. You're from Berlin, but you've been living in Amsterdam. So do you work with brands? And tell us, I mean, is it only print, perhaps, campaigns and publications? I'm very curious about the work you do.
I moved to Amsterdam to freelance about almost 5 years ago. My freelance practice got the name Fanfaretti, and then actually up until 2 months ago, I've been freelancing with it and doing branding and marketing and actually quite a broad range of tasks. Funnily enough, I was really happy to work mostly with Dutch and like local companies and branding studios and just an overall broad range of clients. And since 2 months ago, I kind of switched to a more full-time position. And then meanwhile, doing the full-time position, I'm focusing on doing the publishing house more intensely in a way, because I felt being a freelancer, being by myself, and then also trying to invest and develop the publishing business was a bit too complicated. And this also gave me space to find and meet Laura, who is the editor. So she helps me with all the text stuff from now on, and also from the next issue. We're going to be working more intensely on it together. And yeah, it's Laura O'Brien, and she's based in Stockholm, and we met through common Dutch friends. She was also here for the launch of the magazine, so that was also the first time we met in real life.
And how does the magazine, this printed issue, will represent Fanfaretti as a studio? Because perhaps it's a little bit more than just the work you do, right? There's some beautiful photographies, particularly this issue that I'm holding in my hands right now. It feels very, summery and dreamy in a way.
Yeah, thank you. It is supposed to be summery and dreamy and just bring joy and inspire people. I've also freelanced with both graphic design and photography, and I feel by doing publishing, I can kind of combine both things. So when we went out to interview people, I did the photography, and I love analog, I love print. So actually, a lot of the photography in the magazine is analog. So I think in that way, the magazine is both a curation of people that I admire, and it's also a product of my own work and my own photography and others' photography. So it's kind of just trying to weave together everything that I've been doing in the past into something more tangible.
Among the many stories, there's a very interesting one about, the Fanfaretti font as well, right? What can you tell us? I love it. I mean, how would you describe it, the Fanfaretti font?
It's made by Yelena Sikorova, and she's a type designer. She's absolutely amazing. We met on one of the Letter Space events, which is like a type event here in Amsterdam. And yeah, she offered to make a font for the magazine. And it's obviously inspired by the Amsterdam School architecture. And it's very recognizable, I think. People that know about the Amsterdam architecture school, they definitely yeah, when they see the font, they recognize it. And it's quite a friendly one as well. It's a bit chubby. It's a bit,
Yes, chubby. That's a good way to describe it.
yeah. I don't know if you've noticed, but throughout the magazine, a lot of the contributors make things that are kind of chubby and kind of bubbly, and they're all very organic shapes. And the font is also quite organic in a way.
And Angela, where can people actually get hold of a copy? Is this something that perhaps you're going to send to your clients? Are you planning to sell it in a couple of news agents? Perhaps even the great Athenaeum? I mean, I'm missing that place actually.
Yes, it's the best. Actually, it's being stocked there since a week. You have to go there. It's really the best space and the people are so nice. And then it's also gonna be stocked in Stockholm and Papercut. And I'm in talks with a few other places in Milan and Antwerpen. And so far I'm focusing both the contributors and the distribution is gonna be European or Europe based, just because as a small publisher, it's a bit easier to operate on like a slightly more limited geographical space.
I
Yeah,
know.
and then people can also get a hold of it online for now. But I think the main thing should be that the magazine should be stocked in different stores.
Another story that caught my eye was the incredibly chic photographic shoot in Genève. I mean, I love it. I mean, what incredible vibes. And I actually, funnily enough, is one of the few cities in Switzerland I've never been. But now, after looking at this photo shoot, I think I definitely need to go.
Oh, you have to go. Yeah. It's another, actually, now it became a friendship, but Beatrice Bonato, she reached out to me on Instagram when I had an open call because I was still looking for some editorials from different places in Europe. And she's from Milan and moved there just recently. And she shot this series. And then I really loved one of the images that is the cover now. It became a really nice project for her and for me as well. And I also just recently met her. She came to Amsterdam with her boyfriend for the launch. So the people that came to the launch party that was, I think, 3 weeks ago already at Cloud Gallery could also meet her and speak to her about the editorial that she shot.
Is it a good place to make a magazine, Amsterdam? I feel it's quite exciting. There's a lot of kind of new titles, and I mean, the design scene, as you mentioned, it's incredible. How do you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. I feel the city is so dynamic and people are really curious. And people are also not afraid to approach you to talk about art or anything really. And there's just so much happening. And also historically, talking about the font again, it is based on a magazine called Wenningen. So Jolana found it in the archives of Het Schip, which is a museum here. There is also a long history of print press and publications in Amsterdam. So I feel, yeah, there is some big relation of like bookmaking, magazine making, and Amsterdam or the Netherlands in general. Also fonts. There are a lot of Dutch fonts.
Thank you very much, Angela. And for more information, go to magazine.fanfaretti.com. And we stay in Amsterdam. And this time I speak with the editors of a magazine that is all about queer nightlife, which should be celebrated more than ever. No One magazine is a print publication about underground queer nightlife around the world. And every issue we focus in one city. The first issue is, of course, Amsterdam. I had the pleasure to speak with founders Viet and Jeremy Rader Huang.
Both of us are really interested in nightlife to begin with. And then we started experiencing nightlife in the Netherlands, but also when we would go visit family in Vietnam or in the US and other places in between. And we started noticing there's so many different forms of nightlife in many different places. And that's sort of what planted the initial seed of a magazine like this. Ultimately, there's sort of three moments that helped really push towards No One magazine.
The first moment was when we were at a party called Supernature. So this was, I think, 2-3 years in when we had moved into Amsterdam already. Prior to Supernature, we've gone to other parties and we kind of like try to find ourselves within the scenes. But then through those parties, we've always haven't really found ourselves in those scenes because typically those parties are labeled as gay parties. And then they're like, oh, when you go there, you are expected to be this. You need to dress like this, you need to act like that, you need to have this kind of body. At one moment, we even had somebody that came to us and said that we're not gay enough. And then at that moment, we were like, I don't know what that means. And that was quite unfortunate. But then when we were at Supernature, which is a queer collective here in Amsterdam, in that party, we just for the first time witnessed what we think queerness means, because on that dance floor, you see people of all sizes and shapes. You see people just sort of like expressing themselves however the way they want. You see this, we remember so vividly that there's this, male presenting person who looks extremely like just like your neighbor, no extra makeup, but then wearing an incredible dress and just dancing on high heels. So like all of these things that people, and we thought we knew about queerness, just got completely reversed and expanded. And we were sweaty, we were happy, we were like, this is who we are. And we finally found ourselves. And from that party onward, we also found our community. So that celebrations of queerness was one of the first reasons we wanted to create No One.
Which brings us to the second one, which is one of these times when we were visiting family back in Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. We went to one of the first balls, like ballroom in Vietnam. And this was really, really exciting and mind-blowing for the two of us because it was experiencing this culture that originated from Black, brown, queer people in New York and other parts of the US, and how that was being reinterpreted in a place so far in Vietnam, seeing people who were designing their own clothes with very different movements than we were seeing in the US or in Europe. There was just this energy that was so different and so exciting to be a part of and to witness. And that's when we really realized that this sort of queer wisdom exists beyond the West, and it's not something that's always well documented.
Yeah, and then the final reason of it all is when so in 2021 or 2022, we both lived in Macedonia for a month. And in that time, we had then visited Pristina, Kosovo to visit our friends. And while we were there, we were exposed to the queer scene. We were taken to the only queer bar in the entire country that was located right next to an extremely macho street of people getting drunk every day. And in that region, homophobia is very vibrant. And we were there with our friends who were human rights activists. And we asked them, like, are you not scared of, being here, celebrating who you are right next to the street? And then they were just essentially telling us that, yeah, we are, but if we're not visible, then we will never be visible. And that was when we just got chills and realized that they are literally making queer history. So that this sort of like light up moment in the both of our heads that like queer history is not in black and white, and queer history is still being made today. And that was the moment that we wanted to create a magazine that is documenting contemporary modern queer history in the context of nightlife, where we felt like it's a space that a lot of us find comfort, community, and safety to express who we are and connect with one another.
Viet, you mentioned Macedonia, Vietnam. The first issue is about Amsterdam, but so the whole idea is to actually look at a city or a country every issue, right? And of course, you had started with Amsterdam, which I think, you both have been living there for almost a decade now. But is that the idea? There will be a look at a different city each time?
Yeah, exactly. So each issue, we want to focus on a different city to go a bit in depth and connect these different stories, or at least give a sense of what's happening there. But of course, it also depends a bit on, what's feasible, what's practical. We're a two-person main team. Of course, we also work with contributors and other external, maybe writers or photographers. But it needs to be a place where we have connections, where we can go physically. We also want to make sure that the places are representing diversity. So a place that's maybe not as well documented or talked about as often. And the last is about dimensionality. So a place like Amsterdam, for example, it's known as sort of a queer or a gay capital. But a lot of the collectives or stories that we covered in this first issue, maybe they're not the first things that you see when you search queer Amsterdam or gay Amsterdam. So we want to try to sort of reimagine or broaden the picture of what the queer culture and scene is in these different places.
One thing to that dimensionality is, I think when people think about queer nightlife or just nightlife in general, there's this tendency to think about hedonism, about escapism, about partying and, all of these things. But we really make it an active effort to talk about different aspects of nightlife, which includes safety, which include the politics of nightlife, which includes so many other nuances and conversations that are typically ignored or not talked about enough in that context.
Yeah, it's important to remember that each of these collectives or parties were started for a reason. There's a lack of something in the city that they're created in.
It's like the great story about the night mayor in Amsterdam, which I believe was the first city to have one. I know now London has one. Now it became kind of a little bit of a trend. But so yes, there's much more to it. Of course, there's hedonism and fun, but there's the other side of it. It's also a business. It's part of a community too, right?
Yeah, very much that.
And how do you feel is the queer nightlife in Amsterdam? Do you think there's been some challenges as well? Because we see that in London, many kind of LGBT clubs, they close down. But do you still feel there's a lot of energy there? How do you analyze the nightlife in Amsterdam, perhaps, at the moment?
Well, first off, we definitely have our observations and we have our analysis, but I think it's extremely important to also share that this is only reflective of what we expose ourselves to and in no way representative or comprehensive of the scene. But we do have our points of views about it. I think one of the first thing about Amsterdam queer nightlife is that it's really diverse. When we talk about diversity, it's not just about who's on the dance floor, but it's also about the concepts. So we have sober party, we have trans-led party, we have parties that are very emphasizing body inclusivity, making the dance floor more accessible with people with disability. So there's a lot of concepts, and even more, we have femme-only parties. So there's even more party concepts that are popping up to use electronic music as a device to kind of like generate expressions and all of that. So diversity is the first thing. The second thing that we really, really love about Amsterdam queer nightlife is it's sort of like intertwined relationship with politics, because very often when we go to protests and when we go to marches for liberation and resistance of other countries and other marginalized identities, this is our observations. It's oftentimes 70, 60, 80% queer people. It's also not uncommon that you go to parties and you party until 7 a.m. and then you go to Dam Square and you go on a march. So our queer communities really, really believe that to dance is to resist, to rave is to resist. So we really take that to heart and to really like go off the dance floor together and marching and fighting for liberations of everyone. And that's something we're very proud of with Amsterdam queer nightlife. When it comes to challenges, I think the biggest challenge that comes to our mind is space. I think similar to London, like cultural space is reducing. Amsterdam is tiny. It is a great place. A lot of people move here for, opportunities and so on. But also because of that, what happened is that the space for people, just for queer people who are often not very well off, just start decreasing. So then, there's not enough space for people to live, let alone space for people to dance. So that is a constant challenge. And I think it is also a challenge that the municipality of Amsterdam also acknowledged. And I also know that they are actively seeking solution. So I think there's hope.
We also created this magazine really as a time capsule of each location, each place that we go to at the time. And what I think is really interesting about Amsterdam, I'm curious if it'll be the case for other places as well, but if we look back even at this, which was released just a couple months ago, and all the conversations in it happened within the past year and less, there are so many things that have changed. It was a very pivotal moment, I would say, for the city and the queer nightlife. As an example, there's Club Ram, which was a club that was sort of in limbo since October last year because of various issues and difficulties with getting it open. Now it's opened, and in the interview that we have with them in the magazine, they're still unsure whether they can open or not. There's also a story with Bar Pamela, who since has opened a venue called Tilatek, which is also a queer-oriented cultural space. And besides these two physical spaces, in the time since we released the magazine, I would say there's probably been double the amount of queer parties that are just popping up. There's a party or a collective for every niche that you could imagine. And there's just more and more every day, which is really exciting to see.
Thank you very much, Viet and Jeremy. For more information, go to noonemag.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor, Jack Jewers. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fb@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can always listen again at monocle.com or subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. It's goodbye from me.